right, welcome to the Badger Den, guys. There is a lot going on. I had several streams built up. You don't care about that, I know, but I'm going to try to get two out today because there's a lot going on in the world. So, let's dig in. The Democrats want you to know that your vote should not count. Only illegals' votes should really count to dilute the actual citizens. Because 150 Democrats opposed a bill banning non-citizens from voting in the nation's capital. Again, these are your representatives saying that you should not be able to elect them, but illegals should be able to elect them. Your vote does not count. A bill was to prioritize non-citizens from voting in Washington, D.C. elections were overcome by the majority of Democrats who voted against the measure. A total of 210 Republicans and 56 Democrats supported the legislation which bars foreign nationals from voting in local contests in the nation's capital and repeals a measure passed by the D.C. Council in 2022 that allowed it in the first place. Another 148 Democrats voted against it. Every single one of these Democrats are a traitor. If you are allowing non-citizen illegals who have just got here, who have done nothing to assimilate, allowing their vote to count, it dilutes everyone else's vote. It allows them to vote for themselves. And that's why you're seeing the stuff that we're seeing now. The D.C. Council's decision to allow non-citizens, including illegal aliens and foreign agents, to vote in local elections dilutes the voting power of the citizen. That's just factual. Come on, liberal. Explain it to me. Explain to me why this is unfair. Explain it to me. Let me guess, you're going to say racist. Oh, but you're the one assuming race. Look who's the racist now, liberal. Wrong side of history says what? Non-citizens are not allowed to vote in federal elections, but they are allowed to for certain local contests in some municipalities and states like California. Where are those riots again? Where are those riots? Oh, yeah, California. I wonder why. Well, while the liberals don't understand it, the legal immigrants, they get it. Legal immigrants have swung 40 points to the right on immigration in favor of the GOP. Why? Because they came here legally. They went through the process. They came here, became nationalized, assimilated to the culture and country, and they love America. And they hate what is happening that is being done by the illegal immigrants who refuse to assimilate, who are spouting off stuff like La Raza, the race, and want to carve off California, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Texas into their own little country and go back to Mexico with it. Again, you can go back to Mexico. Go. Nobody's stopping you. Tell you what, I'll buy you a ticket. CNN chief analyst Harry Inton said Tuesday that foreign-born voters in the United States have swung toward the Republican Party on immigration by 40 points since 2020. Why do you think it's been 40 points since 2020? What happened between 2020 and 2024? Immigrant voters have swung harder to the right than any other demographic. Foreign-born voters have gone tremendously to the right on this issue in 2024 and 2025 versus where they were in 2020. The reason this is because people do not think about impacts until it impacts themselves. Legal immigrants are seeing what the illegal immigrants are doing, and they don't like it. They're all of a sudden understanding like this is not fair, this is not right, this is unjust what is happening to this country, and this is not fair to me who came here legally. So the woman who cannot define woman got it right for once. That's right. That Ketanji Brown Jackson character who could not define what a woman is, all of a sudden now understands that you really shouldn't have two yardsticks for measuring discrimination in the workplace. So the Supreme Court, in a rare decision, unanimous, decides with a heterosexual state employee who claimed job discrimination. What's interesting about this is that she did not claim that it was because she was a woman, because women are supposedly in the minority, even though in some parts of the career space and in academia, they are the majority. But she claimed because she was a heterosexual. The U.S. Supreme Court on June 5th ruled unanimously in favor of an Ohio woman who alleged that the state of Ohio demoted her because of her sexual proclivities. She was heterosexual. Justice KJ, she actually wrote the opinion on it, which is hysterical given I've read a lot of her opinions and they're not great. And it's interesting in this opinion because it leaves open the allowability for discrimination in the future. So she basically stated, this is her opinion, we hold that this additional background circumstances requirement is not consistent. So if you were considered part of the majority in the demographic base, you had to go above and beyond to detail out extenuating circumstances and document those extenuating circumstances as to why you were being discriminated against. You had a much higher bar to prove you were being discrimination against. The court finally realized that's probably not right. Everybody should be using the same yardstick for measuring discrimination. That's right, if we were believing in a colorblind, just society. However, what is to note is right here, this clear language that she put in her opinion. Congress established protections for individuals without respect to whether they belong to a majority or minority group. Congress left no room for courts to impose special requirements on majority group plaintiffs alone. This opinion is disgusting. It looks good on the merits and at prima facie value, but when you start diving into it and you think about this, she's basically stating that, hey, if Congress wrote these laws into effect and said, okay, this applies for majority, that they have to have additional circumstances and proof for their discrimination charge to be worthwhile and just and valid, then it's okay. She is okay with discrimination so long as Congress decides that yes, that's okay. So remember that, because that's where we're headed. She has opened a little porthole and stated that if Congress comes out with a law that says, hey, the majority must have additional requirements, must go through additional rigor compared to everybody else, then it's okay. You know what was okay per slavery? The law. Slavery is not moral. Neither is requiring whites, men, women, heterosexuals, anything that's considered in the majority to go through additional rigor compared to everybody else. That is unjust. That is immoral. And, of course, our favorite game, Guess the District Court. A judge partially blocks Trump's anti-DEI and transgender executive orders. Where do you think this judge resides? Justice John Tigar issued a preliminary injunction barring the Trump administration from enforcing three key elements on the orders of so-called equity termination provision, gender termination provision, and the gender promotion provision. So Trump basically said, hey, look, you cannot pick people based upon their race and fire them. So if layoffs are coming up, you can't say, okay, white people over here, black people over here, white people, we're firing you first. Seems pretty logical, right? You also can't do it on gender. So you can't say women over here, men, goodbye. And the gender promotion provision. So basically saying, hey, if there are 100 men and 50 women applying for this, you still have to have a 50-50 ratio, even if the pool of applicants are larger and you're just pulling based upon merit. So this is, he claims, to be viewpoint discrimination. So he doesn't like that we're trying to have a just, and what's the word they like to use? Equitable society. I'll tell you the real word, equality. We're trying to have equal application of the law among everybody here, and that includes whether you're being promoted, terminated, hired, or whatnot. Again, a colorblind society where you're just looking at people upon the merits. So because Trump is saying, nah, you can't pick people out on race, this person is pulling their head out of their what-should-yous and basically saying defunding the programs authorized by Congress may infringe upon the constitutional separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches. So one, they don't like that we're basically calling them out, that they're being racist, that they're being sexist, and they're trying to obfuscate that and saying, well, that's our view, so we're allowed to that under the First Amendment protections. That's not how that works. You can say that you're a racist bigot, but you cannot actually go through and working within the government and actually only promote certain races or certain sexes. That is a violation of equal protection. That's not about running around and saying that you're a racist bigot. Sorry, Judge, You obviously don't know how to judge very well. Now, separation of powers is interesting because a lot of people don't understand this. The way the system was set up is the executive power executes. It goes through and follows through with the law. Congress writes the law, and then the judicial branch, what they're not doing right now, is supposed to determine is that law constitutional or not. Does it follow within the guidelines of the Constitution? That's it. They're not supposed to be making bench law like they're doing right now. So I'm not even going to go into this because it's just stupid. I just explained it right there. This is not a question of free speech. Let's go down to something a little bit better. So Hawley, and I like the guy. He's very poignant in his in the Senate when he is in the Senate hearings and committees when he's really laying into witnesses. He's really top notch. However, this is a huge red flag, and I never will get the chance to, but I'd love to ask him about this. Hawley teams up with Democrats on a $15 minimum wage bill. This is virtue signaling 101. Hawley knows that the federal wage laws are awful, unless he's got a backdoor idea. So they're wanting to raise the federal minimum wage to $15. And for those of you that are like clapping like seals right now, like, no, we want to do that. That's not how you raise your wages. That's how you get your job lost. For example, if you look at what's happened in California where they raised to a $20 minimum wage and they're talking about raising it to a $30 minimum wage now, they lost hundreds of thousands of jobs. You go into a KFC or a McDonald's in San Francisco, do you know what you have? You've got kiosks. You've got robots that are going to be cooking your food. They are not going to raise your wages because you're not worth that much. That's not how it works. They're going to say, hey, look, we can pay $500,000 for this robot that will last for 50 years without complaining. We're 24/7 and essentially costs us $15 an hour. Or we can pay this person that we have to pay $20 an hour on paper. They're not actually paying somebody $20 an hour. They're paying insurance. They're having to pay taxes. They're having to pay Social Security taxes, state taxes. They're actually generally, when you are getting paid a certain wage, that wage is generally 50% or more. So they're actually paying these people, on the actual balance sheet, $30 an hour once you incorporate all the additional taxes and insurance and rigmarole that goes through that with regulations. So it's not a $20 minimum wage. It's what you get paid is $20, but it's actually much higher than that. So for a business, it makes much more financial sense to hire the robot, add in a kiosk, because that is what is going to make financial sense. And so you're basically running out the poorest of the poor to not be able to get jobs. This is horrible discrimination where you're eliminating a huge chunk of the workforce who don't have high skills and are not going to be able to easily transition to another part of the workforce or economic sector. It's just not good economics. This is really dumb unless there's a key on it. If Hawley is thinking that this is maybe going to get paired with, say, a background check piece to where you have to validate every person coming through your door has an appropriate Social Security number, has appropriate birthday record on the birth rolls here in America and validating that they're a citizen, fair enough. What they're trying to do is cause a lot of pain and issue for employers that they must hire Americans. I don't think this is the correct way to go about it, but if Holly's like trying to get this paired with something like that, then I can kind of understand it, because then you're like, okay, Democrats, I'll give you your minimum wage, but you have to validate every person that gets hired as an actual citizen. Personally, I'll just take the validation one, because that is the most economically feasible, and that gets the most amount of people employed and out of poverty. So Senator Hawley should know better, says Rebecca Paxton, research director of the Employment Policies Institute. This proposal would more than double the minimum wage and slash over 800,000 jobs. I think that's low. I think it's much higher than that, as we saw in California and what happened there. Hawley's proposal would take a similar failed policies like California's and export them nationwide. That is 100% correct. The cost of living across the America is very diverse. Paying somebody $20 in Missouri or Mississippi or Arkansas is much different than paying somebody $20 in New York City. It is vastly different. So when you try to aggregate everybody and put them on the same standard, it doesn't work because everywhere is different. That's why you allow the market to price the minimum wage. Even the Wall Street Journal states that California recently raised the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour, a policy that's caused restaurants to cut staff and reduce hours. So people are actually getting paid less per hour, per job, because they're having to do, like in California, the average amount of jobs is something like 2.5 or close to 3, because it's all these part-timers. They cannot get full-time employment because they can't afford to. The actual businesses cannot afford to hire somebody at that wage and keep them employed full-time. They just can't do it. This is dumb. This is ridiculous. This is communistic. And Holly should be ashamed. So, no, you're gay. This is gay. This is very gay. So Florida got caught. You can try to guess the county. There's really only one in Florida that is exceptionally blue. If you've got it, bingo. Florida high school students were drilled for being straight, asked to consider being gay, and told that straight people are to blame for overpopulation. Somebody doesn't know the population numbers and birth rate numbers, do they? Miami-Dade County. There's your bingo card. What do you think caused your heterosexuality? Is it possible that being straight is just a phase? Will you grow out of it? Consider the menace of hunger and overpopulation. Could the human race survive if everyone were straight? This is demonic. This is corruptibility. This is grooming behavior. This is indoctrination. This high school teacher needs to be flogged publicly. Parents were shocked, as they should be. Miami-Dade College course, so an AP, a lot of y'all have like advanced credit and whatnot in high schools where you're taking college. That's what one of those. The course was called Preparing for Student Success. Yeah, this is why the Department of Ed needs to die, and we need to go back to looking at only focusing on math, science, literature, history, very basics. None of this frou-frou stuff. No more underwater basket weaving. No more African dance studies. No more gender studies. None of it. It all needs to go away. Other questions. To whom have you disclosed your straight tendencies? Why do you insist on showing off your heterosexuality? You mean like the nature of who we are? The questionnaire ended by asking students what their reaction to was and about the assumptions you hold about what others are like. So in other words, quit assuming that everybody is normal, because normal is normal. Comes from a textbook, Power, Strategies for Success in College Life by Robert Fieldman, a senior research associate at the University of UMass in Amherst. Again, coming from academia, upper crust, elites trying to destroy the culture. And McGraw-Hill. Yeah. Everybody can look on the back of their textbook. You want to talk about a monopoly, oligarchy, corruption, McGraw-Hill. Well, let's see how based you are, guys. Trump orders investigation into Biden's executive actions, Autopen. So they've been looking at the Autopen. Biden expressed his intent to authorize the use of Autopen for signing presidential actions during his term, blah, blah, blah. Executive actions that are potentially invalid under the law. So there's a lot of gray area in this. Autopens have been used for quite some time, surprisingly. However, they have not been used the way they have been except for Obama once. Obama signed some sort of bill or legislation. It wasn't an executive order. It was legislation once. Obama opened the gate. Surprise, surprise. And then it continued. And then it got crazy to where I believe they're investigating the Autopen under Biden, and they have 3 separate Autopen signatures. They're all Autopens, but 3 separate ones. So were there 3 separate machines, 3 separate groups? Again, we know the 2 groups within the White House that were fighting, the O'Biden White House and then the Jill Biden group. The combined nature of Biden's documented cognitive decline per her, so the investigation into Biden and the classified document scandal basically revealed that Biden was so compromised they could not charge him, but yet somehow he was able to lead the free world. So essentially, we know for a fact that when Hur did his investigations, we know from that point forward, everything that was signed by Autopen or Biden himself should not be, in fact, efficated into law. Because at that point, it was stated by the DOJ, Biden's DOJ that his cognitive abilities were so far gone he couldn't even be prosecuted for the crimes that he had committed. 1,200 presidential documents, an appointment of 235 judges to the federal bench, and more pardons and communications than any other administration in history were used by the Biden administration. Again, this is bad. How far can we take this? This is where we need to be sinking our teeth into. Because the moment Hur released the document stating that Biden's cognitive abilities were so compromised, he cannot function, and therefore he could not be charged, he should not be POTUS. And therefore, at any point in time, any action efficated by Autopen or Biden himself should be null and void. There should be others. So at that juncture, everything for that, for a fact, per Biden's DOJ, should not be efficated, should be null and void. Everything before that should be investigated thoroughly. When did his cognitive decline truly begin? That's the real question. Her forward, null and void. Anything before that, serious investigation. And for all you Brits out there who claim you have free speech, this is your free speech. So a London man has been convicted of a religiously aggravated public order offense. He's a Turkish-born Armenian Kurdish atheist who was arrested because he burned the Qur'an. That's not all. So while he was burning the Qur'an, he screamed, "F Islam, Islam is a religion of terrorism." Fact check true. He burned the Qur'an and was then slashed by a Muslim man with a knife. Surprise much? Critics were outraged that the man who pled guilty to stabbing the other man was released while police continued to hold the man in supposedly free society and free speech society. Despite arguing that his protest was protected speech, the district judge convicted him and declared that his actions were highly provocative and was motivated in part by the hatred of Muslims. Okay, again, you can be as much of a bigot as you want to be. You should be still allowed to say it so we can all see that you're a bigot. I mean, that's kind of how free speech should work. After considering the evidence, I find you have a deep-seated hatred of Islam and its followers. That's based on your experiences in Turkey and the experiences of your family. It's not possible to separate your views about the religion to your views about the followers. Did you get that logical aerobatics? So because you cannot separate religion from the followers, therefore I'm condemning you for burning up the religion. Yeah. I do accept the choice of location was in part that you wanted to protest what you see as an Islamification of Turkey. But he was in Britain. I don't think he was protesting Turkey. I'm sure he's upset about the Islamification of Turkey, but probably also of the UK. But you were also motivated by the hatred of Muslims and knew that someone would be at this location. Again, you're blaming the victim. That's, again, like you leftists like to say, you shouldn't blame a woman who's wearing a short skirt who got raped. That's awful. Yes, she shouldn't be getting raped at all. And that's what you're saying, is that no matter what somebody's doing, just because they're doing something that could lead to some bad associations or some victimization, that doesn't mean what they're doing should allow them to be victimized. Again, lefties, you are not consistent. On one hand, you're saying you shouldn't victimize the victim, but on the other hand, you should victimize the victim as long as it's within a certain class. The victim, Koskun, the true victim, the one that burned the Quran, stated that Christian blasphemy laws were repealed in this country more than 15 years ago, and it cannot be right to prosecute someone for blaspheming against Islam. Would I have been prosecuted if I had set fire to a copy of the Bible outside Westminster Abbey? I doubt it, and he is right. He's 100% right. We are headed this way, folks. This is why I wanted to bring this up. We are headed this way. Hate speech is the beginning, and they will continue down this path. Food for thought. Dig you later.